If power mixed with greed can create disasters, it looks exactly like how Pamela, our HOA president, destroyed the bridge my father and I built together. They claimed it was about safety, but I could see it for what it was: calculated revenge. What they didn't know was that I held something they couldn't control: the legal right to manage our entire water supply. Right passed down from my grandfather. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply walked to the valve and turned it. And in minutes, their $4 million zero-cents resort collapsed like a sandcastle meeting high tide. But the ending, you won't guess it. And what Pamela did after only made everything fall faster than she ever imagined. Now I want you to ask yourself something. If you were pushed to your limit, how would you fight back? It started on a crisp October morning. I stood at the edge of Clearwater Lake, my boots sinking into the cold, damp earth. My 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was picking up splinters, remnants of what used to be our bridge, the same bridge my father and I built by hand. Just 24 hours earlier, it had stretched across the water to that little island where we used to fish every Saturday. Now, nothing but shattered wood, floating like broken dreams. "Daddy, why did they break Papa's bridge?" Her voice was barely a whisper. She held up a piece of cedar that still smelled like the stain we applied last summer. I knelt beside her, but I had no answer. Not one a child should ever hear. It all started with a cold, official notice. Pamela Sterling, president of the Clearwater Estates Homeowners Association. She showed up at dawn, demolition crew in tow. Her silver BMW gleamed like it knew it didn't belong here. She stepped out in her tailored blazer, holding her leather-bound HOA clipboard like a badge. She didn't hesitate. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Marcus," she said. She wasn't sorry, not one bit. But safety regulations are regulations. The bridge was built without proper permits. I tried to explain. My father built it to code. Every bolt, every beam. But Pamela just smiled, the cold kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and handed me a stack of violations. Improper foundation anchoring, inadequate load-bearing calculations, non-compliance with waterfront standards. She buried me in technical jargon, and then stood back and let the hammers swing. Emma watched it all. The same girl who had sat on that bridge with her grandfather, learning to tie fishing knots, now watched strangers destroy it, board by board. My father, Davidson, wasn't just a handyman. He was a builder, a teacher, a man who believed the best things in life were made by hand and built with love. That bridge, it was our final project, 2 weeks before his heart gave out, while he was installing the last railing. Emma had been there, handing him screws, talking about the fish she'd catch from Papa's bridge. But here's the twist, and this is where Emma, without realizing it, saved us both. While I was busy trying to reason with Pamela, Emma was on her tablet playing with her drone app, the one I downloaded for her last month. That evening, she showed me what she'd captured. My blood ran cold. There it was, crystal clear video. A small drone, hovering above our property, 3 days before the demolition, filming every angle of the bridge, our shoreline, our home. Timestamp? 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Who flies surveillance drones at 3 in the morning? Unless they're planning something. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I stayed up until dawn. I used every trick from my engineering background to crack the drone's memory card. And what I found made my hands shake. Buried deep in the data was an email thread, auto-synced to the drone's storage system. Subject, final phase, Davidson property. Sender, Pamela Sterling. Recipient, Richard Blackwood, CEO of Luxay Resort Development. Her words were poison. The Davidson Bridge is the last obstacle to our shoreline acquisition. Once it's demolished, we'll have full access to the eastern shore. The old man's death was unfortunate timing, but it works in our favor. The son, single father, engineer. He won't have the resources to fight us legally. I read it again and again 17 times. This wasn't about regulations. It wasn't about safety. It was a land grab, a power play, and I was their target. But they underestimated the one thing my father left me. Not just land, not just a dam. He left me the power to flood their lives with the truth. I sat in the kitchen that night, surrounded by my father's old fishing magazines. Emma's drawing still taped to the fridge, and I held that brass key in my hand, the same one he gave me just weeks before he passed. We had been standing behind the house, next to the stone shed everyone called the pump house, only it wasn't a shed. "Son," he said, pressing that key into my hand, "water can give life, but it can also take back what doesn't belong. Use it wisely." I hadn't thought much about those words until now. The next morning I went to the print shop, had a professional sign made that read, "Property of the Davidson family since 1962, water rights included." I planted it 6 feet from Pamela's driveway, right where our easement legally ran. When she came out for her morning jog, coffee mug in hand, she stopped in her tracks. She just stared at the sign like it was some alien monument, then stomped up to my front door and pounded on it like I owed her something. "Lawsuit, vandalism, arrest." She was foaming. I just smiled and handed her a copy of the original 1962 deed, stamped, sealed, legally binding. "Have a blessed day, Pamela." And I shut the door. That afternoon, I paid a visit to an old neighbor, Tommy Brooks, 75 years old, sharp as a tack, retired lawyer, local legend. He poured a black coffee and leaned back in his recliner like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. "Your grandfather wasn't just a farmer," he said. "He was the man who saved this entire valley in '62. That dam system of his? It's the reason half these homes still exist." Then Tommy pulled out a thick manila folder. Documents, maps, old photos, legal records. "Marcus, your grandfather's water rights predate this entire development by 40 years. HOA can't touch them, the city can't touch them, not even the county." I looked down at that brass key again, and for the first time I understood what it was. Not just a key to a pump house, but the key to everything. That dam system, still functional, still ours, still under legal control of the Davidson family. And if someone was building illegal structures on protected wetlands, that counted as a certified emergency. "Your granddad gave you the most powerful tool in this valley," Tommy said. "Question is, are you ready to use it?" But I wasn't just fighting a greedy HOA anymore. I was fighting something darker, something colder. So I started following Pamela, not in secret, just watching, learning, trying to figure out who I was really dealing with. One Thursday morning, I saw her silver BMW parked by Clearwater Cemetery. I stayed at a distance. She knelt beside a headstone near the lake, placing white roses down carefully. She stayed there for 20 minutes. Her shoulders shook. Her blazer was still perfect, but her hands weren't. This wasn't the woman who ordered the demolition of my bridge. This was someone broken. Someone whispering to a grave like it might talk back. That grave? James Sterling, her husband. Tommy had told me James drowned 5 years ago during a solo fishing trip. The official cause? Accidental death. But seeing Pamela like that made it real in a way that police reports never could. And just when I started to feel sympathy, she stood, wiped her tears, and pulled out her phone. The moment she spoke, the mask went back on. "Richard, we need to meet. The Davidson situation is becoming complicated." Her voice sliced through the cemetery air. She wasn't crying anymore. I followed her car to the Riverside Cafe downtown. She sat across from a man I'd never seen, silver hair, charcoal suit, and the cold calm of a man who never panics. Richard Blackwood, CEO of Luxay Resort Development. From behind the glass, I watched Pamela grow agitated, slamming her hand on the table. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Like a chess master who had already made his move and was just watching the pieces fall. When they parted, Pamela looked like a woman who had made a deal with the devil and knew it. That night, I went deeper. deeper than I'd ever gone. Tommy helped me dig through every public record, old newspaper clipping, insurance file, and police report he had access to, and then we found it. James Sterling, Pamela's husband, had called the county water authority just 2 days before his death. He requested an audit, filed a complaint about financial mismanagement inside the HOA. The officer marked it potentially relevant, but ruled the drowning an accident. Tommy leaned back in his chair. James was an accountant, Marcus, a detail man. If he was asking for an audit, he found something serious. And 2 days later, he was dead. He didn't need to say what we were both thinking. Pamela didn't just fail to save her husband. She may have had a reason not to. But the thing that hit me hardest was a note I found later that night, folded, tucked under my windshield wiper. The handwriting, shaky, but unmistakable. Marcus, I know what you must think of me. I love James more than life itself, but some secrets are too heavy to carry, and some choices can't be undone. I'm sorry about your bridge, truly sorry, but this is bigger than both of us now. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Pamela wasn't a villain, she was someone drowning in guilt. But drowning people, they'll pull you down with them, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I tucked Emma into bed that night. She asked again about Papa's bridge, and that's when I knew. I wasn't just going to rebuild it. I was going to uncover the truth and expose the machine behind Pamela and Richard's perfect little plan. One way or another, they were about to meet the full weight of Davidson water power. 3 days later, my phone exploded. It wasn't calls, it was chaos. Fake Facebook profiles, Twitter bots, Instagram accounts I'd never seen, spreading one message. Marcus Davidson is an environmental terrorist. They said I was trying to poison the lake, contaminate drinking water, that I was unstable, dangerous, unfit to raise my daughter. It was a full-blown smear campaign, built from scratch to destroy my reputation. And I knew exactly who was behind it. Not Pamela, Richard Blackwood. While she attacked with emotion and bylaws, he attacked with algorithms and bots. But I wasn't going to play defense. So I went live. I set up a 24-hour stream, called it the Lake Water Challenge. If the water was dangerous, I'd be the first to get sick. I drank it, cooked with it, bathed in it, all on camera, all in real time. Within 6 hours, over 50,000 people were watching. And the comments? I've been swimming in that lake for 30 years. If Marcus was poisoning it, I'd be dead. This isn't terrorist behavior. This is dad behavior. By nightfall, # truth about Clearwater was trending, but I wasn't alone anymore. Mike Harrison, my quiet neighbor who worked in IT, knocked on my door with a laptop in hand. Marcus, he said, you're being hit by a professional-grade bot network. He plugged in, pulled up analytics, and the truth hit like a freight train. Every account attacking me had been created in the same 48-hour window, same IP cluster, same posting patterns. They all traced back to a digital marketing firm in Atlanta, a firm that just so happened to work with corporate clients like Luxay Resorts. Then Sarah Chen, investigative reporter from the local paper, joined the live stream. She had been digging deep, and she came with fire. In the last 5 years, she said, Luxay built resorts in 6 states. In every case, they partnered with HOA boards, identified the key holdouts, then launched disinformation campaigns to force them to sell. She showed court filings, recorded phone calls, leaked documents from whistleblowers. It was a pattern, and I was the latest target. So I did the unthinkable. I gave them what they thought they wanted. I walked the live stream audience through my dam system, not in fear, not with secrets, with full transparency, blueprints from 1962, control protocols, environmental safeguards. I showed them how my grandfather designed the system to protect this valley from floods, drought, and disaster. If I wanted to hurt this community, I told the camera, I wouldn't be drinking this water. I'd be pouring concrete into wetlands like Luxay. That line, it broke the algorithm. Comments exploded, laughter, support, outrage. Suddenly, I wasn't the story, they were. By day 2, I had over 100,000 viewers, and some weren't just watchers. State environmental officials joined the chat, asking questions, requesting permits, demanding accountability. Mike organized a Davidson support rally. People from 3 counties came out. Even former HOA members began switching sides. Pamela's perfect grip on the neighborhood? Gone. But Richard wasn't finished. That evening, I walked back into the pump house, this time on live stream, with a police officer. And Tommy Brooks by my side. We documented everything. Legal documents, land deeds, ownership of the dam, and when I held up the 1962 state authorization showing Davidson water rights predated the neighborhood by 4 decades, the chat lost its mind. Wait, this man owns the lake? He's not the problem. He's the protector. Offers flooded in. 3 law firms, environmental watchdogs, local historians, people who'd watched from a distance, were now standing beside me. But just when it felt like we were turning the tide, Richard made his boldest move. He filed an emergency court injunction, claimed I was tampering with public infrastructure, accused me of plotting to flood the community, said I was unfit to have access to the dam. He convinced a judge to issue a restraining order. If upheld, I wouldn't be able to get within 500 feet of the pump house. They wanted to take the only weapon I had left. The hearing was set for the next morning. It was checkmate if I stayed silent. But instead of hiding, I turned their trap into my stage. That night on live stream, with 200,000 people watching, I walked into the pump house one final time, legally, with an officer and an inspector. I walked through the system, explained every valve, every control, every safety mechanism. I read aloud the water rights document, word for word. When I finished, the chat lit up like fireworks. This man's family has protected this valley longer than the HOA has existed. This isn't a trial. This is history correcting itself. By morning, we walked into the courtroom not as defendants, but as guardians of the truth. And the moment the judge looked at Richard's lawyers, she asked, "Can someone really trespass on property they've legally owned for 60 years? The answer? Silence. Checkmate. Reversed. But Richard wasn't the type to surrender. His final move? Far more dangerous, almost. He went after the only thing I cared about more than that dam, my daughter. The morning after the hearing, I should have been celebrating. The restraining order was gone. The judge had ruled in our favor. The truth had finally taken center stage. But then I got a call that turned my stomach inside out. Emma, at school, 2 men dressed in expensive suits approached her during recess. They told her, "Your father's in trouble. We can help keep you safe from the bad water." They tried to lure her away. But Emma, my brave, beautiful girl, did exactly what I taught her. She ran straight to her teacher, pulled out the tablet she wasn't supposed to have at school, and hit record. The footage she captured, crystal clear. 2 men, faces visible. Names we'd later learn were tied to a private security firm hired by Luxie. It was all on tape. The threats, the manipulation, the lies. They crossed the line. They didn't just attack me. They came for my child. The community, they didn't wait. Parents formed a protection network overnight. Emma was never alone again. She had escorts to and from school. People live streamed her walk home. Neighbors we barely knew stood guard at our driveway. Even Linda Harrison, who once yelled at me over hedge trimming, now picked up Emma every day like she was her own. "Nobody threatens kids in Clearwater," she told me. And she meant it. But while the neighborhood was uniting, the truth was still unraveling. Sarah Chen dropped a bombshell that lit the final match. Her report, fully verified, fully documented, linked Luxie Resorts to 5 other communities. Same playbook, same corporate intimidation, same development deals that left families bankrupt and displaced. She even found whistleblower recordings, former employees describing the strategy. Find the weak spot in the community, smear them, push them out, buy the land cheap. It wasn't personal, it was standard operating procedure. But this time, they picked the wrong valley. The HOA meeting that followed, it wasn't a meeting, it was a reckoning. Pamela, still clinging to her clipboard like it could protect her, walked in expecting order. What she got was Mike Harrison standing up and calling for a vote of no confidence. He showed everyone the financial records, the illegal payments, the all-in consulting fees traced straight to Luxay shell companies. Pamela's face went pale. The vote, 47-3. Pamela was removed on the spot, but it didn't end there. That night, she broke. 17 voicemails, left on my phone between midnight and 4 a.m. Some were apologies, some were threats, some were chilling. The last one, "You think you've won, Marcus Davidson, but you don't know what you're dealing with. Richard Blackwood doesn't lose, and neither do I. Tomorrow, I'll use the one weapon you can't fight, the truth about what happened to my husband." The next morning, I issued the ultimatum. Richard, Pamela, end the resort construction, leave Clearwater, or I'd use the water rights my grandfather left me to stop them permanently. I gave them 48 hours. They laughed, then they panicked, and then they retaliated. Construction crews moved in overnight. Floodlights lit the resort site 24/7. They worked nonstop, pouring foundations, framing buildings, trying to finish before I could act. And around the perimeter, private security, armed, recording everyone who came near. Then it escalated. Richard pulled his biggest string yet, the kind that only men like him can pull. He convinced federal authorities to open an investigation. FBI agents arrived at my door. They'd received an anonymous tip that I was planning to flood populated areas, that I was dangerous, unstable, that I had unregulated control over critical infrastructure. They installed surveillance at the dam, stationed agents at access points, even monitored water levels in real time. It was a federal lockdown. For most people, that would be the end, game over. But Richard had overlooked one final thing. My grandfather wasn't just a dam builder, he was a visionary. Back in the 60s, he'd built 3 remote control backup stations, each one hidden, each one connected to the dam via encrypted lines. The main, a decorative stone well in our backyard. The second, disguised as an electrical panel in our basement. The third, our fishing dock. The one Emma and I used every weekend. They could monitor the main system all they wanted, but they couldn't stop what they couldn't find. And now, with legal backing, public support, and proof of environmental violations, it was time. On a crisp November morning, with over 500 people gathered on the hillside and more than 500,000 watching live, I opened my laptop, accessed the Davidson water system, entered the codes, activated drainage protocol. It took 6 hours. 6 hours for the lake to drop 12 feet. 6 hours for Richard Blackwood's illegal $4 million resort to collapse into sinking mud. Luxury cabins tipped sideways. Steel beams twisted and snapped. Heavy equipment sank like anchors. The crowd, silent, then gasping, then cheering. This is better than any movie. David versus Goliath, but David has a dam. But the final scene? That belonged to Richard. He arrived just as the last platform fell. He stood at the edge of what used to be a lake, now just wet earth and shattered dreams. No words, no power, just silence. Because you can buy land, you can buy lands, but you can't buy water, not here, not anymore. They say when you corner a predator, that's when it's most dangerous. And Pamela, she had nothing left to lose. After the lake was drained, I thought it was over. The resort was ruined. Richard had vanished, facing bankruptcy and federal fraud charges. But Pamela? Pamela was unraveling. It started at dawn. Neighbors began calling. She was seen wandering the dried lakebed, alone, covered in mud, mumbling to herself, carrying a gas can. Mike Harrison found her near the ruins of the collapsed resort, soaking wet, knee-deep in sludge, digging through wreckage like she was looking for buried treasure. When he tried to speak to her, she snapped. "You're just like James," she screamed. "He tried to destroy everything I built, and now Marcus is finishing what he started." She broke down, screaming about betrayal, legacy, and control. Mike recorded the whole thing, but that wasn't the end. Because later that afternoon, news crews arrived. They were there to film the aftermath, to document the collapse. And as reporters asked questions, cameras rolling, Pamela appeared, wild-eyed, mud-stained, hair disheveled. She stepped right into the camera shot, voice trembling but rising. "You want the truth about this lake? You want to know why Marcus Davidson thinks he can play God?" And then she said it. "I killed my husband." Silence. Cameras froze. Reporters stopped moving. Her voice cracked, but kept going. "He found out I'd been moving HOA funds. He was going to expose me. He begged me for help when he fell from that boat. I stood there and watched him drown." Her hands shook. "Because if he lived, everything I built would die." The video went viral within minutes. Sarah Chen uploaded it. Parents, neighbors, viewers. It was the most watched clip in Clearwater history. And the police? They'd been watching too. Pamela was arrested on the spot. Voluntary manslaughter, embezzlement, conspiracy, wire fraud. The list didn't stop. Richard Blackwood, cornered by federal prosecutors, was charged with securities fraud, corporate intimidation, environmental violations, and conspiracy to defraud communities across 4 states. Luxay Resorts? Dismantled. Assets frozen. Gone. The HOA dissolved. The community voted to return full governance to individual property owners. No more bylaws, no more self-appointed dictators. As for us, we rebuilt the bridge, exactly how my father designed it, down to the last railing, with community volunteers, donated materials, and Emma painting a tiny wooden plaque that read, "Papa's Bridge, protected by love and water." And when the dam was reopened, slowly, deliberately, the lake filled again. Fish returned, so did the peace. Every November now, the community holds an event, Water Day, a festival, a remembrance, a celebration of what we saved and what we almost lost. And every year, someone tells the story of how a quiet father with a brass key stopped an empire built on greed. Standing on that bridge with Emma, watching the sun fall across the water, I realized something. My father's gift wasn't just the dam, or the documents, or the key. It was the understanding that justice doesn't always come through courts. Sometimes it flows through truth, through courage, and through the unstoppable force of a community that refuses to be broken. Because water doesn't pick sides, but it always finds its way back to where it belongs. That's how I saved our lake, exposed a murder, and reminded the world, when greed rises, legacy rises higher. And nature? She always gets the last word.